Welcome. NOAA has just released its August of 2020 Global Climate Report, and this video is a summary of that report. I hope you will enjoy. This is a quick summary of what we're going to be covering today. August of 2020 was the second warmest August on record, second only to 2016. We are technically still in ENSO neutral conditions, however a La Niña watch has been issued. The Arctic sea ice extent was the third lowest on record. Meanwhile, the Antarctic sea ice was about average. The Atlantic hurricane season so far is the most active on record. We have major wildfires in the United States, Russia, and Brazil. Let's first take a look at the average ranking for this month compared with previous years. Globally, as I mentioned, this was the second warmest August on record, being about 0.02 degrees centigrade warmer than last year. The land temperature was the third warmest, being 0.12 degrees centigrade warmer than last year. The ocean temperature was the second warmest, being 0.02 degrees centigrade cooler than last year. And that's probably due to an increasing chance of a La Niña in the eastern Pacific. The northern hemisphere was also the second warmest, being about 0.05 degrees centigrade warmer than last year. The southern hemisphere, on the other hand, was the sixth warmest and was slightly cooler than the same time last year. This makes 428 consecutive months with temperatures above the 20th century average. So you have to be over 35 years of age to have experienced a month that was cooler than the 20th century average. This is a graph of the long-term temperature variations in August temperatures over the last 140 years. You can see here that the August of 2020 was the second warmest, as I've stated before, but more importantly, you can see the trend over the last 100 years or so of a steady upward gradation in the temperatures. That is global warming. Now let's take a look at the summer temperatures. Summer is defined as June, July and August, and it's very similar except for the August rank now is third rather than second, behind 2016 and 2019. But again, there's a steady rise in global temperatures throughout this period. Let's take a look at how these temperatures are distributed globally. This is a map of the departure from the long-term average in degrees centigrade. Bright red indicates higher temperatures than average, is up to 5 degrees centigrade. Dark blue indicates temperatures below average, up to -5 degrees centigrade. You can see that we have particularly warm conditions in the northern Pacific, Alaska, Canada, United States, Western Europe, and central Siberia. Also China and Western Australia seem to be much warmer than average, and fair portions of South America too. We have particularly cool areas in far eastern Siberia and off the coast of South Africa. Now the area to really note is this one over here in the eastern Pacific. This is the one that's indicating that we may be heading towards a La Niña. This is cold water in that part of the ocean which is upwelling from below. So we could expect in the next few months to have a La Niña, which will generally cool the Earth's climate. Now that last map does not indicate whether any of those temperatures were either record highs or record lows. This map does. This is called a percentiles map, and on this scale, dark blue indicates record cold and dark red indicates record warm. And so you can see from this map there are no record cold pixels. There are only actually two much cooler than average pixels. That's the medium blue shade. There's hundreds of much warmer than average pixels. That's the slightly darker shade of red. And then the darkest shade of red, there are 126 pixels that are recording record warmth in that area. This indicates why the globe is still warming with so many areas above normal and setting new records. Here is a matrix showing the ranking of each month over the last 6 years. You can see I've got August of 2020 ranked as number 2 here. But the thing to notice is that we've had 15 consecutive months where the months are ranked in the top 3 warmest months of that particular time of year on record. And no other time period has had a similar run of high temperatures. 2020 so far is getting very close to the temperature records set in 2016. I think if we go into La Niña towards the end of the year, then it's likely that 2020 will end up being the second warmest year on record, just behind 2016. And remember, at the moment, and we have been for quite some time, we are in ENSO neutral conditions, which means we neither have a warm nor a cool Pacific Ocean. So consequently, these records are quite outstanding compared with what the general climate is. If we went into a El Nino now, we would break all the records. So far we've been dealing only with surface temperatures. Now let's take a look at the upper atmosphere. We'll start with the lower troposphere, which is at an average height of about 4 kilometers. We have 2 major groups that deal with this. That's the University of Alabama in Huntsville and Remote Sensing Systems. UAH found the lower troposphere to be the 3rd warmest, whereas RSS found it to be the warmest month on record. The overall trend for both of them on average is about 0.16 degrees centigrade per decade, very similar to what we're getting for the surface temperatures. Next we'll go to the mid-troposphere, that's about 7 kilometers in altitude. There's more agreement here. UAH found it the 4th warmest and RSS found it the 3rd warmest, with a slope on the trend of being 0.13 degrees centigrade per decade. Now it's not surprising that the slope is less, because as you go higher in the atmosphere it gets colder. Lastly, the stratosphere, that's the odd man out. This is at an altitude of about 17 kilometers, and it's the one layer of the atmosphere that is cooling, which is a unique indicator that the temperature changes are due to changes in greenhouse gases. UAH and RSS found it to be the coolest, although their numbers actually were slightly different, and their trend was 0.24 degrees centigrade per decade of cooling. Next we'll consider the sea ice situation. First we'll go to the northern hemisphere, the Arctic in other words, and this was the 3rd lowest sea ice extent in the Arctic that has been observed so far, and continues a long trend over the last 30 years of steadily declining Arctic sea ice. Now let's take a look at the southern hemisphere, the Antarctic, and there's a slightly different story there. Here we have the sea ice extent being the 18th lowest on record, so it's about the middle of the pack, and it's just below average, although this does represent the 4th consecutive year with below average Antarctic sea ice. Let's take a look at the situation as far as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is concerned. In August of 2020 it was 412.55 parts per million, and that's an increase of 2.6 parts per million since the same time last year. As I mentioned before, we're going into a La Niña watch, which means that a La Niña is likely to happen fairly soon. This is a plot of various models, and you can see there's not a great deal of agreement between them, but we can take the statistical average of those in the blue, red and green curves. You can see all of them predict in the next month or two we're going to be in a La Niña. 2 of them indicate that we're going to be in a relatively mild La Niña, i.e. just less than 0.5, whereas the blue curve indicates it could be a fairly strong La Niña, where the curve drops below -1. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season has been very busy so far. We've had 7 more named storms in the month of August alone, 3 of which became hurricanes, 2 Category 1s and a Category 4, which is a major hurricane. The Pacific hurricane season has not been a great deal different, with 6 named storms in August, 2 of which became hurricanes, a Category 2 and a Category 4. Let's do a quick summary of what we've seen so far. 2020 is still on pace to become the 2nd warmest year on record. We've had now 7 record years in a row, if that's the case, and La Niña is possible by next month's report. So stay safe, and until next time, goodbye.